I had no idea my life would change like this. It all started with a typical dinner. Everything went as usual. Me, Seth, and his family gathered at his parents' house. But this time, something inside me snapped, and nothing would ever be the same again. Just one simple question from my mother-in-law, Leslie, made me stand up and walk out, leaving everyone behind in a heavy silence. That's when I discovered a truth I never thought could exist in a seemingly perfect family. A bombshell secret that my mother-in-law had kept hidden for 3 years. I, the woman they'd constantly criticized for having a career and making my own choices, was now the villain in a power game I never saw coming. The price of silence. For 3 years, my mother-in-law had claimed my infertility was God's punishment for focusing too much on work. But when I got pregnant and found out that my sister-in-law was facing the same medical issues, I asked her, so what is God punishing her for? And that moment changed everything forever. Now, my mother-in-law is banned from meeting her granddaughter, but I can't forget her words, the ones that linger in my mind like an open wound. We need to trust God's plan instead of trying to control it. No one knew what I had been going through, the countless confrontations, the constant criticism from my in-laws. It all added up until I couldn't take it anymore. That night, when I confronted Leslie, I was done pretending. I stood up, walked out, and decided I wasn't going back. I'm 34 years old, and my name is Rebecca. I run a digital marketing agency that I built from the ground up 5 years ago, and I'm proud of what I've accomplished. My husband, Seth, is 36. He's an architect at a firm downtown. We've been married for 8 years now, but our journey together has been filled with more challenges than I could have ever anticipated. We met in college. Seth was the guy who always had a smile on his face, the life of every party. He had this quiet confidence that drew people in, but I was the one who noticed the small things about him, the way he would always ask about my day, or the thoughtful gestures that spoke volumes without saying much at all. He wasn't just charming, he was kind, and that kindness became the foundation of what I thought was our perfect relationship. Our wedding came after a few years of dating, and at 26, I thought I had everything figured out. But Seth's family, that was a different story. I didn't grow up like he did. His parents, Leslie and Fletcher, lived in a big colonial house in Maplewood, a suburb just a short drive away. Leslie never worked outside the home. She stayed at home, raising Seth and his younger sister, Amy. It wasn't until I spent more time with them that I realized how tightly their family dynamic was woven. Every Sunday, without fail, we gathered at their house for dinner, an event that quickly became a tradition. At first, I thought it was a nice family ritual, but then I noticed the subtleties. Leslie would smile at me, but there was something behind her smile, something that wasn't quite right. Every time I talked about my work, about my accomplishments, she'd ask if I was sure I'd still have time for family. Seth's father would congratulate me, but Leslie kept pushing questions about my schedule, making subtle hints that my career might interfere with my role as a wife. She'd reference her neighbor, whose marriage had fallen apart because the wife had become too career-focused. Seth defended me the first time, but when we were alone on the way home, he suggested maybe I shouldn't talk about work so much around his family. I asked why my career was a problem, and he said his mother was just worried about us. I let it go, because we were newlyweds, and I didn't want to start a fight. But things didn't stop there. A year after we got married, Amy, Seth's younger sister, got engaged. She'd quit her job as a receptionist and soon after married a man named Brandon. Their life was completely different from mine. Amy stayed at home, decorating her house and cooking elaborate dinners for Brandon. Leslie would praise her for putting family first. It didn't take long for me to feel excluded. Every conversation at Sunday dinner would focus on Amy's home projects, her kids, and her life. When I tried to join in, Leslie would smile politely, but then redirect the conversation to Amy. Seth noticed, but never said anything. He'd apologize later, saying his mother was just old-fashioned. Then came the moment when Seth and I decided to try for a baby. I thought it would be easy. We were both healthy, young, and ready to start our family. But after 6 months, nothing happened. Then a year passed, and I went to my doctor. The diagnosis came back: hormonal imbalances. The doctor said it was treatable, but it would take time. She suggested lifestyle changes and tracking my cycle carefully. I told my in-laws about it at Sunday dinner. I was hoping for support. Instead, Leslie said that maybe my body was telling me something. She suggested that God had a plan and that maybe my focus on work was affecting my ability to conceive. Amy, who already had 2 young children, nodded along, agreeing that stress from a career could impact fertility. They said things like, maybe you should think about cutting back your hours, or have you considered staying home more? They didn't hear me when I said it was a medical issue, not a moral one. Seth tried to defend me, but I could feel the pressure mounting. For the next 2 years, every time I mentioned fertility struggles, Leslie would bring up how Amy had gotten pregnant so easily because she didn't have the stress of a career. The constant remarks started to wear on me. Every comment felt like a weight, and I was constantly asked about my job, about how much time I spent working. Seth's father looked uncomfortable during these discussions, but he never spoke up. Instead, Seth would apologize on the drive home, and I would feel more and more isolated. As time passed, I felt the tension between my ambitions and my family's expectations grow. The comments about my career never stopped. Every family gathering felt like an interrogation disguised as concern. But it wasn't just about fertility anymore. It was about the very essence of who I was, who I wanted to be. Every time I spoke about my business, my growth, or even a recent promotion, Leslie seemed to shrink a little more into her passive disapproval. I could tell Seth felt uncomfortable, but he never fully addressed it. He told me, once or twice, that his mother didn't mean to make me feel bad, but she did. Her constant questioning about my time, about my role as a wife, felt suffocating. Why couldn't I just be proud of what I'd accomplished without it being twisted into something that questioned my worth as a woman? I had always been independent, and I had built something from scratch, a successful business that I was proud of. But with each Sunday dinner, I began to feel less and less like I belonged in the family. The conflict started small. One day after I mentioned that I'd secured a new high-profile client, Leslie asked if that meant I'd be working more late nights. It was a harmless question, or at least I tried to tell myself it was. But in the back of my mind, something snapped. Why did it always feel like my career was the thing she resented? Seth didn't help either. He'd gently suggest that I shouldn't bring up work so much at family gatherings. He'd say things like, I think Mom just worries, but it felt like more than that. It felt like a judgment. Things took a turn when Amy started having children. She was pregnant within months of her wedding and had another baby soon after. It seemed like everything was happening so easily for her, while Seth and I were stuck in a seemingly endless cycle of fertility treatments and unanswered prayers. The family rallied around Amy, showering her with affection and gifts. It was hard not to feel like an outsider, especially when Leslie made pointed remarks about how easy it had been for Amy. It was as though my struggles were a reflection of some moral failing in me. I started to avoid Sunday dinners. I couldn't stand the passive-aggressive comments. I couldn't handle the endless talk of Amy's children and Leslie's idealized vision of what a woman's role should be. Seth didn't understand at first. He didn't get why I would choose to avoid his family. He'd go without me and tell me how much they missed me. But I couldn't go back, not when every meal felt like an interrogation of my worth as a woman. Eventually, I sought help. I saw a counselor about the pressure I was feeling. I wanted to understand why something that should have been supportive felt so suffocating. The counselor helped me realize that what I was feeling wasn't just about fertility. It was about control. Leslie's subtle manipulation, the way she expected me to prioritize family the way she thought I should, was suffocating. And Seth wasn't seeing it. One day I broke. Seth and I had been talking for hours about our struggles with infertility, about the pain we both felt, and about the pressure I felt from his family. It was one of the hardest conversations we'd ever had. I told him about the emotional toll Leslie's comments had taken on me, and Seth, for the first time, heard me. He admitted that he had noticed the way his mother treated me, but he had always brushed it off. It wasn't until I was on the verge of tears, exhausted from the weight of it all, that he truly understood how deep it ran. But even as Seth began to understand, it felt like the damage had been done. The moment everything came to a head was Thanksgiving. I had already been through so much. 3 rounds of unsuccessful IVF treatments, the endless comments from Leslie, and the constant guilt that seemed to weigh heavier with every family gathering. My body was physically exhausted from the treatments, and emotionally, I was drained. Thanksgiving was supposed to be a time to relax, to enjoy family, but it became the tipping point in the long battle I had been fighting silently for years. We arrived at Leslie and Fletcher's house just like every other year. The house smelled like turkey and stuffing, the table was beautifully set, and the sound of laughter echoed from the living room. Amy and her kids were there, of course, and the atmosphere felt festive, on the surface at least. But underneath it all, I could feel the tension building, the undercurrent of judgment from Leslie, the glances she would steal when I talked about work or anything remotely connected to my career. I was already on edge, my body racked with the physical effects of my second IVF cycle. I had barely eaten anything, not because I didn't want to, but because the hormones made everything taste dull and unappetizing. I smiled and tried to engage, but it was hard. Leslie, as always, didn't waste any time in asking about my well-being. She commented on how tired I looked, and if I was taking care of myself. I told her I was fine, but I could see the concern in her eyes. I knew what was coming. It was then, right before dessert, that it happened. I had just gotten up to grab a glass of water when Leslie looked at me with that too-sweet smile, the one she used when she was about to make another pointed comment. "Rebecca," she said, her voice soft but deliberate, "I hope you're taking care of yourself. You know, sometimes God gives us challenges for a reason. Maybe your body is telling you that you need to focus more on your family and less on your work." I froze. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Her words were like a slap in the face, a reminder of all the times she had subtly suggested that my struggles with fertility were somehow my fault, that my career had been the thing standing in the way of my becoming a mother. I had held it in for so long, but in that moment, the years of pent-up frustration, hurt, and resentment burst out. I didn't know where the courage came from, but I stood up, my heart racing in my chest. "Leslie," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm inside me. "You've been saying that for years, haven't you? That my infertility is a punishment for working, for wanting something outside of the traditional role you expect of me." The room went silent. Even Amy, who usually didn't engage in these things, looked up in shock. Leslie's eyes widened, and she opened her mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. Instead, I continued, the words flowing out like a dam had burst. "And yet, Amy, your own daughter, has the same condition. So what does that mean? If God was punishing me for having a career, what's the punishment for her?" Leslie's face drained of color, and for the first time, I saw her struggle to maintain control. Her smile faltered, and the polite facade she had worn for so many years cracked. Amy stood up abruptly, her face flushed with anger, and she turned to me. "You're being cruel," she said, her voice trembling. "You're using her struggle against her when she's just trying to help." I looked at her, feeling an emotion I hadn't expected. Pity. "I'm not being cruel, Amy. I'm just asking the same questions you should have asked yourself years ago. How is it that Leslie has spent years telling me that my career is the problem, and yet you've been dealing with the same issue in silence?" The room was still silent, save for the sound of my own breathing. Seth hadn't said a word, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. I could feel his eyes on me, but I didn't look at him. I wasn't ready to see the disappointment in his gaze. Leslie tried to speak, but the words she said were nothing more than a jumble of excuses, as though she hadn't heard a word I said. "I was just trying to help you," she muttered. "You didn't understand what I meant." I turned to look at Seth, and for the first time, I saw the full weight of what this conversation was doing to him. His face was pale, his jaw clenched. He said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. I knew then that I couldn't take it anymore. The lies, the manipulation, the constant feeling of inadequacy, it all came crashing down. I couldn't let it slide again, not this time. "I think we're done here," I said, my voice cold. I grabbed my coat and walked to the door, not looking back. Seth followed me, and we left without another word. As we drove home, the silence between us was suffocating. I wanted to scream, to release everything I had held in, but I couldn't. I was exhausted, emotionally drained. I had fought this battle for so long, and now I was done. When we got home, Seth finally spoke. "You shouldn't have said that to her. Amy is going through a hard time, and you attacked her." I turned to face him, my chest tight with frustration. "No, Seth, what she's going through is nothing compared to the way I've been treated for years. I've had to carry this burden alone while your family has judged me for wanting something more than what they think I should have." He didn't respond right away. I saw the conflict in his eyes, the hesitation. It was too much, too fast, and I could feel the distance growing between us. The drive home was a blur of emotion. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, a rush of anger and frustration clouding my mind. I had never imagined I would get to the point where I would confront Leslie so directly, but it felt necessary. The years of passive-aggressive comments, the guilt trips, the subtle attempts to control me had all led to this moment. I couldn't stand it anymore. As we pulled into this driveway, I didn't wait for Seth to open the door. I was too angry, too shaken. I pushed it open myself and walked inside, my hands trembling as I tossed my keys onto the counter. The house felt suffocating, and I needed space to breathe. Seth stood in the doorway, watching me with a conflicted expression. I could feel the tension in the room, the weight of everything unspoken between us. The confrontation had stirred up emotions I hadn't even realized were there. It wasn't just about Leslie. It wasn't just about the constant judgments from his family. It was about Seth, the man I loved, the man who had been my partner for so many years, was caught in the middle of this mess, and I had no idea how we were going to move forward. "I know you're upset," Seth said softly, breaking the silence. "But you shouldn't have said those things to Amy." I turned to face him, the frustration that had built up over the years finally spilling over. "You don't get it, Seth. I've been trying to be the person they want me to be for so long, and I'm done. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when they treat me like this. I've held it in for so long, but now it's come to a head." He took a step toward me, his face tense. "But Amy, she's been through a lot. She's my sister, and I don't want to hurt her. She didn't deserve what you said." I shook my head, feeling the weight of his words hit me harder than I expected. "I didn't want to hurt her, Seth. I wanted to make her see the hypocrisy. She's been walking around acting like she's got it all together, while I've been the one under constant attack for my choices. You don't understand what it's like to be judged like that, to have people make you feel like your struggles are your own fault, like you're the problem." Seth ran his hands through his hair, looking more lost than I had ever seen him. "I do understand, okay? But this isn't just about them. It's about us, and I don't know how to fix this." The words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. "I don't know if we can fix this, Seth. I don't know if I can keep pretending everything is okay when you can't even stand up to your own family for me." Seth's face softened, but his eyes remained clouded. "I've tried. I've always tried. But it's hard to go against my family. They've been a part of my life for so long, and I didn't want to lose them. I didn't want to lose you, either." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of his words sink in. I had always understood the complexity of his relationship with his family, but in that moment, I felt the distance between us growing wider. How could I stay with someone who couldn't choose me over his family? How could I keep fighting for our relationship when I felt like I was the only one fighting? "You need to choose, Seth," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "You need to choose whether you're going to stand by me or keep letting them tear us apart." He was silent for a long moment, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Finally he spoke, his voice quieter than before. "I don't want to lose you, Rebecca, but I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to change everything that's been built up over the years." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I don't either, but I can't keep living like this. I can't keep going to those dinners, listening to their comments, pretending everything is okay. I need distance. I need space." Seth nodded slowly, looking at the ground. "I understand, but it's not going to be easy. You know that, right?" I nodded, though a part of me wasn't sure if I really did understand the weight of what that meant. We had built our lives around this family, around the traditions and expectations they had set for us. And now I was asking him to break away from it all. "I know," I whispered, "but it's what I need right now." We stood there in silence for a long time, neither of us knowing what to say next. The tension in the room was thick, and I could feel the uncertainty hanging between us. But even as I stood there, staring at the man I had married, I knew that things couldn't stay the same. Something had shifted, and I didn't know what the future held for us, but I did know that I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The days following that conversation felt like a blur. Seth and I barely spoke. He continued his routine, going to work, meeting with his father, spending time with his family. But there was an unmistakable distance between us now. I tried to focus on my business, on keeping my head above water amidst all the emotional chaos, but it was impossible to shake the feeling that everything around me was slowly unraveling. The tension came to a head one Sunday evening when Seth told me that he had agreed to attend another family dinner, this time without me. "It's just going to be my parents and Amy," he said, avoiding my gaze. "I think it'll be easier if I just go alone. I need to figure out how to handle this." I didn't say anything, but the words felt like a punch to the gut. The very thought of him going without me, of him choosing them over me once again, made my stomach twist. I had spent years trying to fit into this family, trying to make peace with their expectations. but now it felt like I was being left behind. The moment Seth left the house, I couldn't stay still. I walked around the house, the emptiness of the space pressing in on me. I wasn't just angry with him, I was angry with myself. Angry for allowing myself to be dragged into this toxic web. Angry for not standing up sooner, for not demanding the respect I deserved. I thought about all the times I had tried to make peace, to make things work, but peace had never been enough. Leslie had always found a way to make me feel like I wasn't enough. Every comment, every glance, every suggestion that my career was the reason I couldn't conceive, it had all been a subtle attempt to control me, and I had let it happen. When Seth came home that evening, his face was pale, his eyes were filled with a mix of frustration and guilt, and I could tell that the dinner had been uncomfortable at best. He sat down on the couch beside me, but there was no warmth in his gesture. "I talked to my dad," he said quietly. "He understands why I'm upset, but he thinks we need to work things out with my mom. He said if we don't, it's only going to get worse." I looked at him, my heart sinking. "And what about you, Seth? What do you think?" He hesitated, his hands trembling slightly as he ran them through his hair. "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't know if I can keep doing this, Rebecca. I love you, but I can't keep fighting them." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I could feel the walls closing in on me. All this time, I had been waiting for Seth to stand up for me, to take my side, to tell his family that I was his priority. But he hadn't. And now I was faced with the cold reality that he was too torn between me and them to make a decision. "Is this really about me, Seth?" I asked, my voice trembling with emotion. "Or is it about you not wanting to disappoint your family?" He flinched, but didn't answer. His silence spoke volumes. The weight of it all was suffocating. I felt like I was drowning, like I was giving everything, but getting nothing in return. The love I had for Seth was still there, but I couldn't ignore the way his family had torn at the fabric of our relationship. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. "Maybe we need a break," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Maybe we need some time apart to figure out what we really want." Seth looked at me, his face a mixture of disbelief and pain. "What do you mean, time apart?" "I mean that maybe we need to step back from everything," I said, my heart aching with every word. "I can't keep living like this, Seth. I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when you're still stuck in the middle of this, and I don't think I can keep pretending that your family's behavior doesn't hurt me." He stared at me, his eyes wide, as if he had never considered this possibility. "Are you saying you want to leave me?" he asked, his voice shaky. I shook my head. "No, Seth, I'm not saying I want to leave you, but I can't keep living in a situation where I'm constantly being undermined, where I'm made to feel like I don't belong. I need to find myself again. I need to remember who I am, outside of your family's expectations." Seth didn't say anything for a long time. He just sat there, his face contorted in frustration, his hands clenched into fists. "I don't know if I can do this, Rebecca," he finally said. "I don't know if I can lose my family over this. I don't know if I can be the one to make that choice." I stood up, my legs weak, and walked to the window. I needed to get away from him, from the suffocating tension in the room. The weight of his words pressed down on me, but I couldn't ignore the reality any longer. "I think you need to decide, Seth," I said, my voice low but resolute. "You need to decide what's more important, your family or your wife, because I can't keep living in the shadows of your family's expectations. I'm not asking you to choose me over them, but I'm asking you to stand up for me. To stand up for us." The silence between us was thick. I could hear the sound of my own breath, the steady beat of my heart in my chest. I didn't know what the future held for us, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living like this. The days after that conversation were the hardest I had ever faced. Seth and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was always about his family or their expectations, never about us. The silence between us felt deafening. He would leave for work every day, and I would spend my time alone, working on my business, but even that felt hollow. The joy I once found in my work had disappeared, replaced by the growing emptiness inside me. I was exhausted, physically, emotionally, and mentally drained. The IVF treatments had taken their toll on my body, and now it felt like everything else was slipping away. I had spent so much energy trying to keep my marriage intact, trying to make sense of the mess that Seth's family had created, but now I couldn't do it anymore. I was broken and I didn't know how to fix it. That night, after another dinner with his parents where I stayed home alone, Seth came back late. I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. the weariness that had settled deep within him. We hadn't talked about the big conversation in days. We hadn't addressed the elephant in the room, the one that had quietly grown between us, pressing down on us with every passing moment. I stood in the kitchen, trying to put together a simple meal, but my hands were shaking. My thoughts were scattered. I didn't know what I was doing anymore. I felt like I was losing myself in this battle that seemed never ending. The pressure of it all had finally cracked me. I wasn't the person I used to be, the strong, independent woman I had once been. I had been reduced to someone who was constantly second-guessing every decision, every move, because of the toxic environment that had been built around me. Seth walked into the kitchen, his footsteps slow, hesitant. I didn't turn to face him immediately. I couldn't. If I did, I might crumble. "Rebecca," he started, his voice soft but full of emotion. I set the knife down on the counter, my hands trembling. I finally looked up at him, and in that moment, I saw the same pain in his eyes that I had been feeling all along. It was as if we were two people, stuck in a relationship that had been fractured beyond repair. "I can't do this anymore, Seth," I whispered. "I can't keep pretending like everything is okay. I can't keep fighting for a family that doesn't accept me. And I can't keep fighting for a marriage that feels like it's falling apart because of them." He reached out to me, but I stepped back, my heart racing. I didn't want his touch right now, not when it felt like everything was falling apart. I needed space. I needed clarity. "I don't want to lose you," Seth said, his voice cracking. "But I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix this." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of his words crash down on me. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he could see the damage his family had caused, that he could truly stand up for me. But in my heart, I knew that things had gone too far. The damage was deep, and I wasn't sure if we could ever come back from it. "I don't know if we can fix it either," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't know if I can keep living like this. I don't want to resent you, Seth, but I can't keep sacrificing myself for a family that will never accept me." His face fell, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of my words had hit him harder than anything else. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said softly. "I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't see it, Rebecca." I shook my head, my eyes brimming with tears. "You didn't see it because you didn't want to. You didn't want to see how toxic it was, how toxic they were to me. You were too busy trying to keep the peace, trying to keep them happy, that you forgot about me, about us." Seth stepped forward again, but I backed away, the distance between us now feeling like an insurmountable gap. "I don't want to lose you, Rebecca. I love you." But his words felt hollow now. How could he love me if he had never truly defended me? How could he love me when he had let his family's judgment tear us apart without ever standing up for what we had? "I don't know if you do anymore," I whispered. "Maybe you love who I used to be. But the woman standing here right now, she's not the same person. I don't even recognize myself anymore." The tears finally fell, streaming down my face as I sank into a chair, the weight of everything crashing down on me. My career, my infertility struggles, my family, his family. It all felt like too much to carry. I felt completely alone in this, even with Seth sitting right in front of me. Seth stood there, helpless, as I cried. He had no answers, no solutions. He had no idea how to fix what had been broken. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice full of guilt. "I should have seen it sooner. I should have defended you." But it was too late. I had already been broken. The trust, the love, the bond we once shared. It had all been chipped away bit by bit until there was nothing left but the hollow shell of what used to be. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep pretending that everything would be okay, that things would magically improve. I couldn't keep sacrificing my happiness for a family that would never accept me. And I couldn't keep holding on to a marriage that felt like it was slipping through my fingers. "I can't do this anymore, Seth," I said, my voice barely audible. "I need space. I need to figure out who I am outside of this, outside of you and your family." Seth's face contorted with pain as he nodded, unable to speak. We both knew what had to be done, but neither of us was ready to face the reality of it. As I sat there, tears falling freely, I realized that this was the darkest moment in our relationship. The moment when everything came crashing down, and there was no going back. The days following that confrontation felt like a fog. Seth and I lived in the same house, but we were worlds apart. We barely spoke, except for the occasional exchange about practical things, like bills or the upcoming doctor's appointments. I felt suffocated by the silence, but at the same time, I couldn't bring myself to speak. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say anymore. The words felt empty, like they wouldn't make any difference. It wasn't until the third day after our argument that something shifted. Seth had left for work that morning, and I spent the entire day pacing through the house, trying to sort through my thoughts. I had been avoiding the feelings, the ones I hadn't wanted to confront. But that afternoon, something inside me clicked. I was no longer just reacting to the pain. I had reached a moment of clarity. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the piece of paper in front of me. I had written down every reason I was feeling the way I did, every hurt, every resentment, every fear. But as I read it, I realized something important. I wasn't just mad at Seth for not standing up for me. I wasn't just mad at his family for the way they had treated me. I was mad at myself for letting it go on for so long, for letting their expectations define me. I had spent so much of my life trying to prove myself to others, trying to prove that I was worthy of love and respect, trying to prove that I could balance my career and my marriage, trying to prove that I could be both a successful businesswoman and a mother. But in the process, I had lost sight of who I was. I had allowed other people's judgments to shape my sense of self-worth. It wasn't their fault, it was mine. I realized that I had been living for them, living to meet their standards, to fit into the role they had defined for me. I had been so focused on making everyone else happy that I had forgotten to make myself happy. I had forgotten to value myself for who I was, not just for what others thought of me. I picked up my phone, and for the first time in days, I sent Seth a text. "We need to talk when you get home, about everything, about us, about me." It was simple, but the weight of it was enough to make my heart race. I didn't know what would happen after we talked, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep living like this. I had to make a decision for myself. When Seth got home, I was waiting for him in the living room. I had taken some time to gather my thoughts, but I could feel the nervous energy between us, a thick tension that had built up in our silence. Seth stood in the doorway for a moment, his eyes scanning my face, trying to gauge my mood. His expression was cautious, like he was unsure of what to expect. I could see the guilt in his eyes, the regret for everything that had happened, but I couldn't let that be enough. He needed to understand that I was no longer willing to be a passive participant in this relationship. "I'm sorry," he started, his voice low. "I know I've let you down, and I don't know what to do to fix this. I don't know if I can fix this." I shook my head. "It's not about fixing it, Seth. It's about understanding that we're at a crossroads. We can keep pretending everything is fine, or we can be honest with each other. We can either keep dragging each other through this, or we can face the reality of what's happening and make a choice." Seth took a deep breath, and I could see the realization settle in. For the first time, he was truly listening, not just to what I was saying, but to the deeper meaning behind my words. "I've been so focused on my family," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "on making them happy, on keeping the peace, that I've forgotten what matters most. What matters is you and me, our family. I've been so afraid of losing them, I didn't realize I was losing you in the process." I looked at him, feeling a shift in the air between us. It wasn't the resolution I had been hoping for, but it was a start. I could see the sincerity in his eyes. He was finally acknowledging what I had been saying all along. But as much as I wanted to believe that this was the breakthrough we needed, a part of me knew that it wasn't enough, not yet. I needed more than just an apology. I needed him to understand that I had to put myself first. I needed him to understand that the way he had let his family treat me was unacceptable, and I couldn't keep sacrificing my happiness for a family that didn't respect me. "I need space, Seth," I said, my voice trembling. "Not from you, but from your family. I can't keep letting them influence our marriage. I need time to figure out what I want, who I am, outside of everything that's been weighing me down." Seth nodded slowly, his eyes filled with understanding. "I get it, and I'm willing to give you that space. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." The weight that had been pressing on my chest for so long finally started to lift. I wasn't sure what the future held for us, but in that moment, I knew that I had to take control of my own life again. I couldn't keep waiting for Seth to choose me. I had to choose myself first. "I'm not asking for things to be perfect, Seth," I said softly. "I just need to find peace, and I need to find it for myself first." He reached for my hand, his grip firm but gentle. "I'll stand by you, Rebecca, no matter what." It wasn't the perfect solution. It wasn't the grand reconciliation I had once hoped for, but it was real. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was starting to take control of my life again. The days after our conversation were heavy, each one dragging as we both navigated the new space we had created. There was no sudden miracle where everything clicked into place, but there was a sense of quiet determination between us. Seth and I continued to live together, but now there was an understanding. I needed time to heal, to rebuild myself, and to determine where I stood in this marriage and in life. Seth, for his part, did everything he could to respect my space. He took more initiative in his own interactions with his family, and for the first time, I saw him distancing himself from the suffocating hold they had on us. It was a small victory, but one I couldn't ignore. However, despite the progress, I could still feel the lingering impact of everything that had happened. Our marriage was not magically fixed. It wasn't a fairy tale resolution. And the fallout from my confrontation with Leslie and Amy, though necessary, had begun to reverberate through the family, making it impossible to pretend that things hadn't changed. It all started when Seth's father, Fletcher, called me. His voice was measured, calm, as usual, but the undertone of concern was evident. He asked if we could meet for coffee the following day without Leslie or Amy present. I agreed reluctantly, feeling the weight of his call hang in the air. The last time I had spoken to him was after the Thanksgiving dinner debacle, where I had confronted Leslie about her comments. I had expected things to cool off, but it seemed they were only just beginning. The next day, we sat down at a small cafe near my office. Fletcher's face looked worn, more tired than usual. There were deep lines around his eyes, and his hands shook slightly as he stirred his coffee. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened," he began, his voice low. "And I realized that I never fully saw how bad things had gotten. I've spent so much time justifying Leslie's behavior, thinking she was doing it all for the family, but I've been blind." I didn't say anything. There was nothing I could say. Fletcher had been part of the problem, just like everyone else, but he was the only one who had begun to recognize it. "I'm sorry for not standing up for you sooner," he continued, "for all the times I let her push you aside, for all the times I allowed you to be the target of her control. It wasn't right." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Part of me wanted to be angry with him for his silence, for his complicity. But another part of me, the part that wanted to find peace, simply couldn't hold on to that anger anymore. "I appreciate you saying that," I said quietly. "But what I need now is to move forward. I can't keep going backward, rehashing every detail. I just want things to settle, to be left in peace." Fletcher sighed, a heavy, defeated sound. "I understand. But I don't think you can move forward without understanding how far-reaching this has been. Leslie won't admit it, but she's been manipulating us all for years. Not just you, but me, Seth, even Amy. And the worst part is, I let her. I didn't want to see it. I thought it was normal for her to try to control everything, but it's not normal. It's toxic, and I've allowed it to poison our family." It was the first time anyone had truly acknowledged what Leslie had done. I hadn't expected this from Fletcher, but it was what I needed to hear. It was the validation that had been missing for so long. The truth was finally out in the open. "I want to fix this, Rebecca," Fletcher said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I'm not proud of what I've allowed to happen, but I can't change the past. I can only be honest now." "I appreciate that," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But I can't be part of that cycle anymore, Fletcher. I can't keep being the scapegoat for everything that's wrong in your family. I've been hurt enough. I need to protect myself now, and I need to protect my marriage." Fletcher nodded, wiping a tear from his eye. "I know. I understand. You've been more than patient with all of us." Our conversation ended quietly, with Fletcher promising to continue trying to reach Leslie. But I knew deep down that nothing would change until she was ready to face her own actions. And I wasn't sure that day would ever come. The fallout from that dinner, my confrontation with Leslie, had set off a chain of reactions. Seth's family had taken sides, some in support of me, others in support of Leslie. But no one spoke of it directly. It was a cold, silent war. Leslie had stopped reaching out to me, but she had started spreading her version of events to anyone who would listen. Seth had warned her to stop, but that only seemed to push her further into her own narrative. Amy, however, had tried to reach out. After our confrontation, she sent me a long, heartfelt email. She apologized for everything she had said and done, admitting that she had been manipulated by Leslie for years. She explained that she had been afraid of losing her mother's approval and had taken out her own insecurities on me. I read her words, And while I appreciated her honesty, I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. She had been complicit in my pain for far too long. She couldn't expect me to erase the years of hurt with an apology. But there was a small part of me that understood her struggle. She, too, had been controlled by Leslie, and now she was starting to break free. The hardest part of all this was that I wasn't sure how to move forward. I wasn't ready to reconcile with Leslie. I wasn't ready to embrace a family that had hurt me so deeply. But I couldn't stay in this place of bitterness forever. I had to find a way to heal, to move on, and to protect my own happiness. That night, after everything had been said and done, I lay awake in bed, thinking about the future. My pregnancy was progressing well, and despite everything, I still had hope for the life Seth and I could build together. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I wasn't afraid of hard work. I had spent years building my business, battling infertility, and fighting for what I believed in. I wasn't about to give up now. It's been weeks since the fallout, and things have started to settle, but the lessons I've learned from all of this will stay with me forever. Seth and I, after everything, are still together, but we're not the same as we were. We've had countless conversations about what went wrong, what we need, and what we both want moving forward. We've set boundaries that protect me from his family, and for the first time, he's really listening. It's not perfect, nothing ever is, but it's real. We are learning to communicate, and that's the foundation we're building on now. It's a slow process, but I can see progress. As for Leslie, I've made my peace with the fact that I can't change her. I can't make her see the harm she's caused, and I can't keep holding on to the hope that she'll ever truly apologize. If she ever finds a way to do so, it will be in her own time, but I'm not waiting for her. I've learned that my peace isn't dependent on her. I've learned that I can't keep seeking approval from someone who has never been able to offer it without conditions. The hardest part wasn't confronting Leslie. It wasn't even standing up for myself in the face of her manipulation. The hardest part was admitting to myself that I had been complicit in my own suffering. I had allowed myself to stay small, to be the version of myself that everyone else wanted, not the person I truly am. But through all the pain, through the broken moments, I found myself again. I found the woman who built a business from scratch, who believed in herself even when the world didn't, who had dreams of becoming a mother despite the hurdles. I found her again, and that's been the most healing part of all this. I'm 30 weeks pregnant now. Seth and I are planning for our future, one that doesn't revolve around pleasing his family or living up to their expectations. It's a future where we can make our own choices and define our own happiness. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about it. As for my daughter, I know I will raise her differently. I will teach her that her worth isn't tied to anyone's approval. I will teach her that it's okay to stand up for herself, to set boundaries, and to never let anyone define who she is. I will give her the freedom to be herself, to make mistakes, and to grow without fear of judgment. I've learned that family doesn't have to be blood. Family is the people who lift you up, who love you without conditions, who respect you enough to let you be who you are. And if that means cutting ties with people who refuse to see you for who you really are, then so be it. I have learned to let go of what isn't serving me, and in doing so, I've made room for the love and happiness that I deserve. The hardest part of all this was facing the truth about myself, about my marriage, and about the family I had married into. But now I see that facing the truth was the only way I could finally start to heal. And with that healing comes the most powerful lesson I've learned. I am enough. Not because of my career, or my ability to have children, or my relationship with anyone else, but because I am me, and that is more than enough.